All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the anatomy of a horse. And we're going to do so using this 3D model of a horse here, which is on Sketchfab. Link is in the description. All right, so if we look at the horse here, we're going to start up here at the head. Right, a horse has what we refer to as a muzzle. So this is going to be the muzzle here, and a muzzle is basically an elongated snout. So think of the nasal region in a human that is elongated, and that's what we are going to call the muzzle. Now, some people in the horse world will call this the forehead. It's still okay to call that the frontal region. Now, as you come back to sort of the backside or posterior aspect of the head here, you are going to reach what is called the pole. And the pole is essentially the connection between the skull and the cervical vertebrae, right? And so that's going to be your pole. And you can still use some human based terms. We could still call this the buccal region. We can still call this the mental region where the chin is. We can still call this the occipital region. Here you have the auricular region, which is the ears, right? But there are some, again, some specific terms used in the equine world. Here you have the crest, which is essentially the cervical vertebrae region, right? And that is going to lead back to what we refer to as the withers. So this is the withers here. And the withers are essentially the interscapular area. So here you have a scapula, here you have a scapula, right? This would be the interscapular region, which we are going to refer to as the sort of like the withers. You have the thoracic region, which sometimes they refer to as the back. And then you have the sort of lumbar region, which they refer to as the loin. And then you have the sacral region, right, which is going to be the croup. And the croup is essentially where the femoral joints and the hip joints are going to be at that level. Okay. And so then you have the dock, which is the point of attachment really with the caudal vertebrae and the sacrum. So this is where the tail attaches. Okay. You have the sort of the hip joint here and the point of the hip. So this is going to be basically the femoral region, and then you have the femur coming down, and then you have a joint right here which is equivalent to your knee, right? So this would be the femoral region, then you would have the tibia down here, and so this would be the equivalent of the knee joint, but we call this the stifle in horses, and it's called the stifle in a lot of quadrupeds, also called the stifle in dogs, right? Then you have what is called the gaskin here. The gaskin is essentially going to be the tibia, and then you have what is called the hock, which is basically the ankle joint. You have the cannon. This is the cannon here, and your cannon is essentially your metacarpal, right? So, or sorry, your metatarsal, right? And so that's going to be basically the bones of the hands of the feet, the cannon, right? Then you have your fetlock, which is sort of the metacarpial phalangeal joint. And then you have the pastern, which is essentially the phalanges, and you have a long and a short pastern. As we move to sort of the front limb or the forelimb, right, this is going to be the shoulder. This is going to be the scapular humeral joint here, the shoulder, right? Then you come down, you have what we call the elbow, right? That's going to be the connection between the humerus and then the ulna. And then you have down here what is essentially the wrist of the horse, because this is going to be the ulna coming down, right? And you have a joint here, which is a connection between the ulna and the metacarpal, which is the cannon bone, but in horses they call this the knee. Why? I don't know, but it's just essentially the joint between the metacarpal, the cannon, and the ulna. Then again, you have your pasterns, right? And then you have the hoof, which some people call the coffin bone. If you look underneath of this, that would be the coffin bone. right? So one of the things to pay attention to when you look at this is just a couple of the differences, like the stifle, which is actually equivalent to the knee joint, right? And then you have this being your femur, you have the tibia here, and this is essentially the ankle joint. So the ankle is way up here. Then you have your metatarsals and your phalanges. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the actual underlying anatomy or the skeletal anatomy of the horse.